this one right here for all my people, you know. Yo, man, this one right here for all my people, you know what I'm saying? For all my people. Some crazy times that we living in, man. Real crazy. It just proves that, you know, more so than ever, we need to pray right now. Because when you pray, on the day to day, it's what you say, what you say. It's okay, it's okay. When you pray, what you say, on the day to day. Dear Lord, I'm just a man trying to get cats to understand. Taking time to make a stance, riding with your plans. Help me to bear fruit in the work I do. Yo, that's straight from Colossians. Yo, I got that from you. But it's hard, cause I'm just a cat from the boulevard. Get up the cars, now I'm trying to go where y'all got me on my knees, cause kids is growing faster. All this chitter chatter of war and disaster. Now you the world master, can you give me some guidance? With these lyrics right here, we got a nice alliance. My mama always told me there'd be days like this. That's why I hold my head high and get my praise like this. For my people in the hood saying your life ain't fair. They put a limit on themselves, so yo, don't go there. Sometimes the trail seem dark, but the God we shine. That's how this prayer on my mind. When you pray, day to day, what you say, that's what you say, what you say. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Pray, what you say, day to day, on the day to day. It's okay. Let me turn the attention in a different direction. Now let me give a suggestion. Let's all aim for perfection. One generation to the next. Try to make a connection. Take some time for reflection and try to make a correction. Shorty's in the ghetto to a future hello. Not enough time for us to sit back and settle. It's deeper than a smoke or drink. My job is to make you think. We on the brink where you decide to swim or sink. Get beyond technology. Take heed of prophecy. Way out of poverty is to come and live honestly. This American dream is not a fly to scheme. No facade is in God and we are redeemed. On him I lean. That's why I say what I mean. This is for every infant, adult, and even teen. We gotta make it out some way, somehow. So the time to begin to pray, it starts right now. Day to day, day to day. What you say, it's okay. What you say, day to day. It's okay. Lord, bless my mom and bless my nieces. Hold them real tight till the world fall to pieces now. Bless my brother and bless my cousins. Bless aunts and uncles and give the streets some. Bless my friends, bless cats in the pen. Even bless enemies, that's one love from D's. Bless my sister-in-law and her fam too. Look at the way the prayer list just grew now. Bless the nation through the times we're facing. As the hearts get to racing, let's try to find some space. Bless the drug fiends that move through the scenes. And bless the catchers out here chasing the green now. Bless the silent and bless the seekers and bless the seekers and bless the teachers and bless Davidson Square. That's where the really are. Matter of fact, just bless the world. When you pray, day to day, what you say, it's what you say, what you say. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. When you pray, what you say, what you say. On a day to day, it's okay. Cause when you pray, on a day to day, what you say, it's what you say, what you say. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Yeah. What you say, what you say. On a day to day, it's okay. There's no harm. Drop it to your knees. No matter what way you come, he always hears you. Cause when you pray, it's okay.
Anybody in this building this afternoon who can help me close this message and begin to celebrate the God who still works miracles? I can't tell you when he's going to fix your situation. I can't tell you when he's going to work your circumstance out. Because it's suddenly or eventually. spiritually, he's still worthy to be praised. So I need somebody on a Sunday afternoon to help me lift up Jesus. I need somebody to help me glorify God. And stretch out your arms, open up your mouth, and say, anyway, you bless me, Lord, I'll be satisfied. Is there a witness in this church that God can do it however he chooses to do it? I don't know when he's going to work it out. I don't know how he's going to work it out. But since I know he's able to work it out, he may not come when I want him, but he'll always be right on time. Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Somebody shout yeah! Shout yeah! Yeah! Give him glory! Give him glory! When it's too much for your hand, put it in God's hand. Watch him work it out. Watch him make a way. Watch him fight your battle. Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Won't he do it?
Pastor Rush, how you doing?
Real good. How about you?
Great. Apostle the Thomases, how y'all doing?
Doing wonderful.
Yeah, and Miss Lucas, I don't know how to address you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm Overseer Lucas.
Overseer Lucas. Okay. Y'all ready to talk about some church?
Yes.
Let's get to it.
Let's have a conversation. Hey, yo, let's chop it up, man. Hey, yo, let's have a conversation. Hey, yo, may I interject? It's about time for communal reconnect. Power of the we in some type of context. Working on the us so we can hit up what's next. It's that grown brother, grown sister type of flex. More like soul check, not just collecting checks. Fact, not feelings is what we got on deck. Take the high road, so this here is high tech. Getting to the real, everything that we hitting on. Pull up or sit down, tell me what you sipping on. Reclaiming kinghood, that is what we getting on. Real headlines is what we spitting on. So, hey now, yo, let's have a conversation. Maybe take a sec to talk on what we facing. Only way to change is to change the situation. How about we break bread now and have a conversation? Hey now, yo, let's have a conversation. Maybe take a sec to talk on what we facing. Only way to change is to change the situation. How about we break bread now and have a conversation? Let's have a conversation. Hey, yo, let's have a conversation. Have a conversation. Have a conversation.
All right, we are the Real Bravado Network, and welcome to a special edition of Have the Conversation. We talk in church today, okay? We're going to talk about, I'm going to go a little bit about the history of the Black church. We're going to talk to a few pastors. We got some questions about the church, and it relates to Black folks and what's going on with us today. So strap in, let's get to work. So before we get started, do me a huge favor. If those of you that are watching on YouTube or will be watching later on YouTube, if you can go to our YouTube channel, the Real Bravado Network, and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and there's also a bell. that bell there will send you reminders whenever we go live. And we go live nearly every week about we're talking about Black people relationships from an image perspective. And over the last couple months, we've been over here rocking and rolling, cooking and learning, about that. All right. So what I just did, if there's anybody out there on YouTube who's going to join us live, I might mention this a little bit later. If you got anything that you want to say, you can actually type in the comment. I can put it up on the screen, or I just put a link. If you go directly to YouTube, I put a link on the comment section. You can click that link and you can come aboard and you can interact with us today. Okay. So I think that's a little bit of the housekeeping that I got going on right now. I got a little bit of a different setup, so I'm like kind of all over the place. Oh, by the way, these are not sunglasses. They're just regular glasses. They just look like sunglasses because it's kind of dark in here, okay? All right, so let's get going. When I started the Real Bravado Network here on YouTube, I started this live stream that we're on now. We call it Have the Conversation. I decided to engage this live stream in 3 different phases. And those phases are related to her image, his image, and our image. We started live streaming, Have the Conversation about 4 months ago. And we started with our first phase, which was her image. And what we mean by image is, or when we talk about image, we talk about it from this perspective. Image is the reputation that a person is known for, which includes behaviors. It includes the character. It also includes our appearances. I have a series of questions that I want you to think about for a moment. So what is our collective image today? How are we seen? What is our reputation? What is the reputation of Black folks and what we're known for? When answering that question, does something positive come to mind or not? What are our current behaviors, our current characters? And when you think about us from like an appearance standpoint, how are we impacted? What imagery does that bring to the forefront when you think about our image, our behavior, our character, how we look? Today, are we proud of our collective image? How is our standing in this country? How is it impacted by our image? When you imagine a Black woman today or a Black man, what does she look like? What does she behave like? Now ask yourself the same question regarding our Black men. What imagery comes to mind today when you hear Black people? What about the image when you start thinking about Black people during and prior to the Civil Rights Movement? Do you have the same image in your mind as you do today? When you compare the two, 1965 Civil Rights Movement and what we think today, are you proud of who we are today? So prior to current day, prior to where we are today, where did our collective image come from? Some people might say your mom, your dad. Yeah, sure. I can make an argument that our collective image prior to modern day came from the church. Church gave us a reputation. They gave us behaviors. They gave us character. They even gave us how to dress. And y'all know, for those of us who are a little bit old school about the churches, boy, church Sunday, you had your best. I mean, I remember going to church, Vaseline grease all over my face, shoes shined up, everything ironed and pressed the night before. I even remember faking sick, so I didn't have to go to church. And I remember my grandma telling me, "Oh, that's fine, baby. You can be sick, but you better be sick all day." I remember her not even being so much as to be worried about getting us ready for church, because her philosophy was, I'm leaving at this time. If you're not in that car, you better get to church before I do. And I remember quite a few Sundays oversleeping or just taking my time. I remember hearing that car start up and her peeling out, and I'm going, "Oh Lord," and having to run to that church before she got there. Now, how you beat a car to church is beyond me, but that was the expectation. Church for Black folk, it's something to think about. It's something to smile about. Most of us have that in common. Don't matter the denomination. There are a lot of things within the different denominations that overlap, So what I'm going to do today, take a few minutes this morning, or not this morning, this evening, is I'm going to examine two articles, one written from Time Magazine, the other one written from Harvard University's, I think it's called like the Gazette or something, their college magazine that talks about a little bit about the history of the Black church. Then after that, I got some questions, and then I got some pastors that I'm going to be talking to, okay? All right, here we go. Black churches were among the first institutions that were built by Black people and run independently of white society in America. Black people, when you think about, especially the Christian religion, most of us, we always, we hear people saying, the pro-Black movement, you took on master's religion. But here's the thing. We took it and we made it our own. We made the religion our own through various denominations. And that runs the gamut from being from the AME church to the Church of God in Christ, our version of Baptist, Pentecostal, I can go on and on, even non-denominational. I can go on and on and on and on and on and on. For people systematically kind of brutalized during the slavery period here, followed by Jim Crow segregation, the church provided a refuge, a place for people who look like me to get self-affirmations, to get teaching, to get learning, to get psychological and spiritual sustenance. Because not me, but what my grandmother's generation and her mother's generation were dealing with. I'm glad I was born when I was born. I don't think I would have been quite built to go through what they went through. But the church was there. The church was a symbol for Black people. It was also a symbol for upward mobility. It was also an expression of Black talent. When you think about Black talent, when you think about music, when you think about art, when you think about poetry, when you think about presentation, you think about the Black church. What R&B singer or group, the Temptations, the Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, all of them have a common, all of them. Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle, Gladys Knight. What do you think all of them have in common? They all came out of the church. And talking about church music itself, Mahalia Jackson. I remember 80s and 90s, it was a big thing, choir competitions and all this, that, when Black churches go visit other churches, everybody, the mass choir come, you got your drummer, you got your piano whooper, you got your pastor, you go to another church and you go to put on the show. You go to put on a show. The other thing that I remember most about Black church, political movements, political information. safety. During the civil rights movement, when people like Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of those men during that time, when they had to move about the country, they were moved throughout the country from pastor to pastor, from church to church, to do the works. The security at the time provided by the men of the church. Information being spread. There was no TikTok, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook. Barely had a telephone in the house during that time. Media wasn't widespread. The messaging about what was going on with us, what we were fighting for, how that movement was to unfold, all passed through the church. There was a time that an elected official could not, they had to come to the church to talk to us. They had to come. Full stop. Had to come through the church. When families broke down, husbands and wives split, there was the church. When you think about Black history in this country, how can you think about any of it without thinking about the Black church and what it meant for us and what it did for us and how it supported the movements, not only just internally, but also externally, socially, nationally, the church. I think about, and I know I'm known for the play around here a little bit. When I think about our image today, how we look today, how we appear, how we come across publicly, if the way that our men, our women dressed, treated, acted, if we acted, treated, dressed, behaved the way we do now back in the late 50s into the civil rights movement, how much of that would have been taken seriously? Go back and look at what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. People came from church to watch across that bridge. America saw Black folk in suits and ties and long dresses, shiny clothes, haircuts, getting brutalized on national TV. The church was the standard, the moral compass. The church. I wrote all this stuff out, guys, and I ain't followed none of it, which is fine. So here's my question. And I'm going to bring on some of my pastors. We're going to talk about this a little bit. So what happened? Church now, what does it mean now? Because church was everything in the house, especially in coming out of Reconstruction. What happened? All right, let's get to it. Hello there, pastors. How y'all doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
Okay, Pastor Rush, what did you think about that? What did you think about that monologue?
I kind of thought when you were presenting your soliloquy that you didn't leave much for us to talk about. No, it was awesome, and I think you're spot on. I think that you give much to question and to share with insight. I think I'm sure the others feel the same way. You know that it's a great topic, and it's a great opportunity to share our hearts and what we think about the Black church and where we are.
Okay. The Thomases, what did you think?
Well, actually, when I heard it, you just made me look back. When you went to talking about the 60s and all that, I was
Yes,
a part
sir.
of that. I was a part of that. And I remember how a lot of things went as opposed to where they go now. And when you spoke about dress and the way that they look then as opposed to the way they look now, we wouldn't have been accepted and we couldn't have carried the word because they thought you was a joke. Back then, that was the life, that was the way, because the way our faith was. We had to have our voices heard. Now it's passed to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So,
I agree.
go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
I agree with Pastor Rush and Apostle Thomas when they say that you really took us to a place of having us to really open our eyes and reflect back on the beginning of the church's existence. And I can remember, I can relate to you when you speak about your grandmother and going to church, because that was one of the things in my home as well. We're going to get up and go to church, and that was just our life. Church was our life. It back then it was a necessity, and today it's an option. It wasn't an option for me growing up. It was
No.
you're going to do this. It wasn't you had a choice to sleep in, and like you said, you can fake sick on Sunday if you want to try to stay home from church, but it's no plan, it's no nothing. You're gonna be sick all day long. So
All
I
day,
can
all day long, all day long.
yes, I can attest to that.
Yeah. So back then, I would even say through the 60s, I would say even through the early 90s.
Yeah.
What do you guys feel the role of the church was for Black folk? The Thomases, I'm gonna start with you because you're the guest.
Well, the role of the Black folks then in the 90s, it was kind of like a twofold, because in the 90s is that's whenever they took our rights. When they said we were abusing our children from the way we whipped them and things of that nature, at that point, that seed was planted in our children that, all I got to do is make a phone call and I can stop being guided. All right. The church only had so much to say because they tied their hands, so to speak. And those same children today look at their children as opposed to the ones before them.
For me, the change in the church, we raised our son as I was raised. I was raised to get up and go to church, and he was raised the same way. And he was a 90s baby. Even when he got older, you don't have a choice. When you get grown and then you're out of my house, then you have a choice. But if we're getting up to go to church, you're getting up to go to church. But there were times where when society or legalism came in, and it caused our children to feel like I have a voice now and I can voice my opinion. And so therefore, I don't have to go. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that, because I have the legal system on my side. Because if you chastise me as you were chastised, then there's going to be an issue. So I think really where the church was concerned, the church began to kind of drift back in certain instances from where we were back in the day. Back in the day, there was structure. Back in the day, we had a bond. Back in the day, there was unity. If someone was sick, and as you said, when families fell apart, the church was there. Now, in the 90s, the church began to just take a different turn. It is some structures of the church are not established or the way that they were back when in the 60s, when we first started looking at the structure of the church, there's been a great change.
Yeah. Pastor Rush?
The structure is a very good word. I think it gives us that twofold perspective that that a question that you asked about the history and the purpose of the Black church. It's a twofold perspective, and I think that the historicity of the church gathers momentum when we look back and it moves forward toward where we are today as a primary agent in a socio-economic way and in a religious empowerment way. Those are the two aspects that generated the Black church. And the church became that primary agent, as you talked about earlier, TJ, about how men were trained, how we as a Black people were trained, how we as a people were nurtured and virtually launched into a credible position in life. In fact, this is where leadership came from, was the Black church for our community. We don't have that today. That's why I say it was a vehicle then, but it's no longer a vehicle. Not only, as you spoke about, using one particular area of example in the music industry, we have many, multiple examples of people who were singers, who were awesome singers then and even today. But not only that, we had great business folks coming out of the church in the Black community. We also had great politicians, political figures that stood mighty in our community, that was well respected. You talked about the integrity in your monologue, how the Black church launched individuals out into the community at large. And then the educational aspect of it all. We were educated. But what I will push back on, and I would argue with, when it comes to the external preparation of the church historically and even presently, and hopefully it does in more of the future, I would push back and argue that all of this is external. But what did it do for our eternal existence? What did it do for our future as people who believed in the gospel? I understand what it did for us as our neighbors. And I think love should be spread abroad with our neighbors. And I think we should have political leaders, religious leaders, and business and educational leaders in our community. But the church primary position in the world was not for those things. Those things came out of the church, but the church was primarily discovered by Christ to preach the gospel. Does that make sense? And so when TJ comes back, I guess the concept that I'm trying to say with those two word pictures is that I think what we needed then, especially coming off of or actually being groomed from slavery into our own consciousness, we needed some self-esteem, self-assurance, and etc. And as stated earlier, you just couldn't dress any kind of way, and you couldn't look any kind of way, and there were a lot of things we needed to do physically that were necessary to have some level of integrity.
Yeah, Miss Lucas.
Well, when I was growing up, we couldn't tell my mom we were sick because she would use that scripture. If you sick, you going to the elders. The elders gonna pray. You going right to the altar. There wasn't no such thing being sick. Not when I was growing up. You couldn't play that. Not with my mother. Hallelujah. And my children was the same way. You know, when they got sick, okay, we going. I did 'em the way my mother did me. We going right to the altar. They gonna put some oil on you, and we gonna pray. You gonna be healed that day. You're not gonna be sick on a Sunday. No, you're not. And so over the years, what I have seen is so many. I call them pimps. So many pimps have opened up the churches and have mistreated the people to the point the people they looking like, wait a minute, you know, what happened? What happened to the people who loved on us and gave us the truth? And they, you know, they corrected us because they love us, not these people. What I hear that's going on in some of these places, it make my skin crawl how people take advantage of folks because they know a lot of people, when we go to church, we looking for God, you know, to lead us and guide us in everything that we do and say so we can know how to make it in this world. But if you got somebody in there and they a wolf, they're not for God, they're just there to mistreat people and do things to people, that's horrible. And that's what you're seeing now. And God is uncovering these folks, you know, and a lot of stuff has happened. So that's
Absolutely.
so yeah, when generations come, these new generations, they look and they say, well, you mistreated my mama, my daddy. I don't want that. So
Pastor Rush, do you think
Yes.
the church? Do you think the church today has the same influence on Black culture as it did like prior and during the Civil Rights Movement?
No, because I think we're living in different times. But I also think that the influence that was placed on the church during the Civil Rights Movement is different. Early on during that period in history, the church played a role. Not only the church, but Christians played a role in Black rebellion.
What do you mean?
Well, and in the preparation of Black people and in the leadership roles, what they saw was negative stuff because there was nothing to bring a change about. Religiosity won't bring a change. It will only make you think you're better than your neighbor. The only thing that can bring a change is the gospel, and Black folk didn't know that back then. And as I stated, all we knew was a dress code. All we knew was to bring our check home to our wives, etc. And so I was reading an article this week, and it just sparked my interest because we know that there's been some connection from the Civil Rights Movement to the present in some sense when we think about in 2018, because Representative John Lewis, he spoke at Harvard as the keynote speaker. So that's letting us know that there was some influence in the church because he was a die-hard Christian, and he truly believed what he was doing. But in the article that I read, a lady by the name of Catherine Alexander said this: yes, I think the Black church still has a place in today's society, but I also think that the Black church needs to update the way it's educated its members. We're in a different environment, and this is not your daddy's civil rights movement. Makes sense, but I say that no. Why do I say no? I say no, that there's a disconnect because the Black church, for the most part, promotes a moral, religious gratification that you can reach a standard of perfection that will satisfy God, and that's not the gospel. Christ has already satisfied God. What we're doing is judging people on the basis of their shortcomings, and that's what the church is full of, sinners. This is why the gospel needs to be preached, because only the gospel saves, and only the gospel frees. And so when you are free, then you're able to coexist with other sinners. Those folks my sister was talking about, those pastor / pimps, they're sinners. Remember, God is no person who deals with individuals in a partial way. He deals with sinners all the same. We need Christ. That's what Romans chapter 5, verses 12 through 21 talks about. It talks about Christ coming and keeping the law for us, which we could not keep, and we still can't keep.
Right.
But he died. Not only did he live that life for us, he also died for us. He didn't die for himself. He died in our place.
Yes.
He died for that pimp. He died for that prostitute. He died for that person that we don't like to sit next to, right?
Right on. I'm going to the Thomases real quick. Same question. Do you think the Black church still has the same influence on Black culture as it did back then? Because remember, in my monologue, I feel like, from my perspective, the church set the culture.
Look at what was opposed to what is, and I think it starts with the head. Like we had to be a part of that because that's what my parents was taught. All right, so if that seed has been planted in you, this is the thing that you're going to teach. No day in today's time in society, a lot of the churches are not the same, and people don't follow them. But if the pastor stands on his conviction and allows the people to see his truth, his conviction, they will follow him. One thing I do know, being a pastor, you demand respect and you will carry God's word. And I see a change in it for the simple fact, I use me as an example. We got to live that righteous and that godly life before people because people are watching us. And if you live that way, then some will come, but you got to show them and be the leader that say, I will not go back to that. This is the way. And I've seen a dramatic change in our house here lately.
Thomas, I have a question for you. You mentioned something. You said it starts with the head, and my first thought went to Black men in the church. What happened to the Black men in the church? Because I know during the Civil Rights Movement, when I was growing up, the church was full of men. You go to an average church now, you'd be hard pressed to find a man outside of the pastor.
That's true. The thing of it was, back then, like you said, around the 60s, at that point, we had riots, looting, and all that stuff, and it was about the money. They began to get money, and they lost their focus. But there were some that stood fast to their convictions. Now, my father, he was one of those, because I was one of the kids. If I say, hey, well, they doing it, he said, they ain't got nothing to do with you. You gonna do it like this. This is the way. And he meant that. And, if you didn't get smacked upside the head, which I didn't want, I listened because that was my idol. That was my leader. If daddy said it, it was the gospel. And that's how I live my life today, because I'm one of those people, I got a loud mouth. I know what I know. I speak about what I know, and I stand on what I know. And I show you what I know. Now, you want to do me differently, but I know the word don't change.
Right. Pastor Rush, what happened to the men in the church? Oh, hold on a second, Pastor. I got you muted. Hold on. Go ahead.
Thank you, son. Oh, man, I was coughing up a storm. That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Men refuse to be in the church, in my opinion, after 37 years of pastoring. Men refuse to be in the church because they're not participants. They're not empowered. And men, if they're not empowered, black men are not going to invest in what they are not a part of. And they're not a part of the church. And excuse me, I'm not against. Go ahead.
Pastor, real quick.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
But I got to get this in. That statement that you just made, do you think that's the same reason why black men have decided to disenfranchise themselves away from the family?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Because they're not participants. And they're not going to invest. Black men they refuse. If black men cannot be leaders, they will not. I'm trying to be as careful as possible with this statement because I don't want to offend in any kind of way. But black men, if they cannot be leaders in the church, if they cannot be leaders in the home, if they cannot be leaders of their families, they will not invest their time and their resources. I plead the fifth on the rest.
We ain't pleading no fifth over here. We over here having the conversation because the work needs to be done. For me, and I mean, and of course, I'm not speaking a lot of time on this subject. I'm speaking from a position of still learning. But one of the things that I saw that I believed, and I hate to blame like a section, but when you start rolling into the 2000s, you saw the rise of prosperity preaching. And then and the rise of prosperity preaching coincided with the exit of men out of the church. So what was it about prosperity preaching that men was like, I'm out? And the ladies said, I'm in.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking the group. Go ahead, Pastor Rush.
Well, it's really simple. I planted my first church in '89, and the goal was to reach men. And the reason why it was to reach men, because if I knew if men were there, women are coming. But that dynamic has changed within the church consciousness, the way it's taught. Men are going after women, and in some instances, they are replacing men with women. And the prosperity started gaining ground, the less men that were there. And women would invest in these men and promote them more and more, even though there were few men that they were promoting. And now men are not going there.
So what was so intoxicating about, I don't want to turn this completely into like a bash on prosperity preaching, but what was so intoxicating about the theology of prosperity preaching that was ear tickling to our women, but repulsive to our men?
It empowered women.
Is that a bad thing?
No, it's not. But there are certain things in scripture that doesn't change. In
like
fact,
what?
100% of scripture doesn't change. And if you add to it, there are some consequences for that. I would argue and ask the question, when does authority changes from the home? If there's a male and a female married, living in that home, when does the authority change? Does it change when you are in the home, driving to church, or in the church? When does it change?
I want to ask
or do you never have the authority while you're in the home because you're not running anything?
I want the Thompsons to answer that one for me.
Well, for us, the authority never changes. My husband is the head. I know that he is the head. He's the head when we're at home. He's the head when we're out of the home. He's the head when we are in the church, because there is an order. And I submit to that order. But for a lot of women, that is something that does not happen. Because if they're making the money, if their income exceeds the husband's income, or they're in the ministry and the husband's not in the ministry, or whatever, they cannot find themselves in a place of submitting, because they have been taught that, I'm a liberated woman. I am, I make my own money, and I'm basically, I'm bringing all of this to the table. So my voice should be louder than yours, or my voice, or I have a voice. But in our house, and we've had this conversation, I think, before, TJ, that I know my place. I know my place in the home. I know my place outside of the home, and I know my place in the church. My husband is the head because that's who God called the head to be. I am a helpmate, and that's what I do. I help to push him, and we walk together.
And to take him on cruises that he don't want to go.
Side by side.
Did you hear me, Doctor?
What did
you hear me,
say?
Doctor? I said, and take him on cruises that he don't want to go. Look, see?
Every now and again, he will get drugged, but he can say that it was not in vain drag. He does get something out of the trip.
I bet he does. I bet he does. All right. I want to take a quick break. I want to play something real quick, and then I'm going to come back, and I got one final question that I want to ask. Or maybe two questions to kind of wrap this up. This wasn't intended to be a long thing, but because we're going to have this conversation a few more times, especially when we start dealing with our men's content. But hold on a second.
When something goes wrong, the smart thing to do is to complete a forensic examination of the steps and decisions that were made that led to the poor outcome. How do you approach such an undertaking when the issue that needs to be examined gave you life? With nearly 80% of Black people being born to a single mother home, the thought of presenting information that calls into question the choices and decisions she made may be one of the more difficult things a person can do. Why? Because we grew up watching mom work 2 jobs, come home and cook, clean, help with homework, ask strangers for help. We watched mom make a way when you wanted to go on a field trip and there was no money anywhere in sight. How do we honor the job when the job has led to the poorest outcomes for Black people in America? Many men like Tupac and Boyz II Men have memorialized mom in chart-topping songs, and those became anthems in their own right. How do you reconcile celebrating mom and putting her under examination at the same time? Welcome to a special edition of Have the Conversation. We are producing a 2-part live streaming series on our YouTube channel, Real Bravado Network, entitled Queen Mother.
Okay. Real quick, I do have a kind of a transition question. Oftentimes on the streaming show I use a lot of data statistics and primarily get them from blackdemographics.com. So I want to ask and this is for all 4 of you. I want to ask this question. With nearly 80% of Black people over the age of 55 being born in this country to a single mother home, where was the Black church and where were they at when this started accelerating in Black culture? And what can the church do now to address it? The reason why I'm putting it that way, those of us who are Generation X and Generation Y, so we're talking about people that are between like 50, between 30, 35 to about 55. That's Gen X, Gen Y, and we're so that's the middle Gen X transitioning to Gen Y, which is where I am, and then Generation Y transitioning into millennial. If you got a gentleman, I got nephews, they're in their 20s. If they decide at 27, 30 that they want to settle down and get and start a family, get a wife, start a family, these boys will not have a woman, a black woman, that they can start with. They can just start with. They're going to have to go in. Most of them are going to have to go in and select a woman who's already made. That was not the case prior to 1965. So my question is, has the church thought about this? Have they identified this as an issue? Is this of importance? Because we're looking at the church now. It's not, 70, 80% of church population is just a lot of ladies and a bunch of kids. So how do you guys, as pastors, now that I'm presenting it that way, what are your impressions about that? What do we do?
I know when my mother, she was taught that it don't matter what your husband do, whether he's in the house or running around, you do not get a divorce. You stay in that marriage. And so we have to reach our teenagers and say, look, your body is your temple. You need to love yourself. Don't just, throw yourself out here to the whole world, and because you bring all these different spirits in there. Value yourself and wait till you get married and then have a child. But we're not taught that because a lot of our children don't go to church anymore. They're not taught the word anymore. So a lot of people, even though there's a lot of people in the church, it's like a generation. That generation is in the church. But the outsiders, they're not. So they're not being taught to, preserve yourself. Wait on somebody. And so my children, I have adult children. They don't have any children. Everybody keep on saying, your children don't have any children. No, my bonus children, my bonus son does. He has children. So those are my grandbabies. But the children I birth, they don't have any children. And they almost...
You have sons?
I have two sons with no children.
And how old are your sons?
25 and 28.
25, 28. Have you ever have they ever talked to you about the day that they decide? Are they married?
They're not even married.
They're not even married. Have they talked to you about what's out here for them?
Yes, right now they say, Mom, I'm just enjoying life. They travel a lot. So right now, that's not, marriage is not on their mind right now.
But the reason why I'm asking, it might not be on their mind now. A lot of men don't start to really settle until they started hitting that 3 number. That's when they really start to really, on some point, start nagging at them. And then usually when that 3 and then the numbers after that starts turning into a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, then they become more conscious of that. But the older your boys get, how likely is it of them, are they going to be able to go out and start their own family?
Right. And Hosea always talk about that. So it's going to be very interesting because he said, mostly every female that I meet already have children.
They already got children.
Mm-hmm.
My question is about the church. I mean, 80%, there's 80%. I mean, 75, the numbers are between 73 and 75% single motherhood. But, if you know anything about statistics and data, that's, so I get to go with about 73%. There's always that range. And then you look at the marital population of our women, which is only 25%. That only leaves about 3 to 5% of women Black women out here that are childless. But 54% of black men between the ages of 18 and 60, they're childless. The one thing that people get really shocked about is when I point out that the vast majority of black men are childless. The overwhelming majority of our women are not. And I made this statement on a couple streams. You know, our black men are going to have to, if we want us to survive, and if you actually start looking at the numbers and start really thinking about what that means for our survival, and the fact that we don't have any real, only 25% of us have real families, you know, like husband, wife, and child, you know, what does that mean for our survival? That 54% are going to have to come in there to the 74% of our women and take on that responsibility. So as the church, how does the church, the way it's currently constructed, deal with that? Because the church we spent the stream talking about the church was where the problems got solved at. How do we solve that? Yeah, yeah.
We just have to encourage the men to come back.
To what?
Because, you know, I think if you don't focus on what they don't have, just encourage them. Like, look, we know if you don't have this and that, don't worry about this and that. Just come to the Lord and encourage yourself. You know, we have to learn how to encourage the men and find a way to get them in instead of tearing them down. Because nobody wants to go somewhere and feel bad because they at this job or they can't get a job. They don't have any money to put in the offering. And you know, some people, they make you feel bad. Oh, you don't got no money. You came up in this church. You know you're supposed to have an offering. Well, what if I don't have an offering? I can't come in.
But here's the thing. I hear what you're saying. And I know I harp a lot on data. You ladies have been with me for 4 months now. I harp on the data, but the vast majority of black men earn enough money to be in the middle class. It's not a matter of resources. Black men have the resources. The average black man earns $21 an hour, and if 53% of those are single, that man is that's enough money. That's a start of family money. And if a woman is coming in as a true helpmeet, the average black woman makes $36,000 a year. That's a $70,000 home. What do you mean you can't make it off of $70,000? I grew up. Let me tell you something. My grandmother had me, her son, my siblings, like 7, 8 kids, and nowhere near $40,000 a year. At times, there probably wasn't 20 in that house. I'm just saying.
Well, we talked about this before, though. Like you said, the men who has money, they want somebody up there on their level too. And
why do you think that? Why do you think that?
They don't want somebody to bring them down.
Miss Lucas, and I know that's a thought of our ladies, and I need to be quite. This is and maybe the other men, the two pastor men on the can back me up on this. You being on our economic level is not a criteria for us selecting you as our woman. It goes for a productive provider male. Selecting a woman based on her income goes against everything we stand for. Is her money nice to have? Yes. But that's not what attracts us to you.
Then they should go ahead and marry
Mr. Lee Thomas. Was I right or wrong in that statement, Mr. Lee Thomas?
You was dead right. You was dead right. You know, we don't think with our cranium all the time. It's what our eyes see. Think about the fact.
Yeah.
You know, he has a figure that is becoming, I don't care where you come from. I like you to work for me. I think about the mind later, you know, but then you got to mature to that because you only know what you know. That's the same thing with you asking about the men in the church. You can't teach what you don't know because it hadn't been taught to you.
Right on.
Society has taught you.
TJ,
Yeah.
going to what you were asking about the males in the church, I think it goes back to what Pastor Rush said earlier. In order for us to get to the place to where there aren't the single moms in the church and everything, we have to stop judging, because that's why there are a lot of individuals that are missing. That's why a lot of people don't want to be a part of churches now, because they feel like I may as well stay in the world because the people in the church are no better than the people in the world, because they're judging. And
Well, the
so it's
people in the
very
church
important
aren't
for
any better
us.
than the people in the world. We're all the people.
That's true. And that's the thing. We have to understand that as the body of believers, when we are the example for the world to see and carrying
Right.
the gospel, that we are no better than anyone else. And that's one of the things that I often try to express, that I'm a sinner saved by grace just like everybody else. I have faults just like everyone else. And I try to be as transparent as possible, but there are a lot of people that they don't have that transparency. Once we become believers, once we get in the body of Christ and we have a title or we have a position in the church, then we begin to elevate ourselves to feel like, we're above other people and that we have never done anything wrong. And that's where the misconception comes, and that's where we start judging individuals to the point to where individuals don't want to be a part of the church because they feel that that's what the church is, instead of, as Pastor Rush said, us preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not about a look. It's not about your social economic standards. It's not about any of those things, but it's about us bringing you to the knowledge of Christ through the word of Christ, and he's love. And so that's how we have to get to that point. Instead of judging people, we have to love them, because with love and kindness, that's how Jesus drew us. And so that's how we have.
I completely hear you and understand. And I've said before, and I think you've heard me say before, Dr. Thomas, is that our better versions of our men are going to have to come in and do this job. We're going to have to come in and do it. I harp on it almost on every stream, no matter what the topic of the stream is. I always come back to this because if you look at this from a critical standpoint, I don't know how much of time we have left that there is a Black culture, if that's even such a thing anymore, because culture is set by family. We don't have any families. A woman and 5, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1 children is not a family. It's a woman with some children. So my question is, or I'm gonna restate the question is, at what point are we going to take this seriously? Now, my generation, Generation X, is the generation that actually has to do this, has to figure out how to fix this. We're coming into this at this stage. I'm 45 years old now. In the last 5 to 6 years is when I start to understand that we remember the very first stream that we had when I asked the question, do we have a problem? Most of Generation X or the beginning of Generation Y, we're starting to understand that we got a problem here. And it's going to take the men, the 40-year-old men, 45-year-old men, and the 30-something-year-old women to get together. These men that don't have any children, but they got enough money to be in the middle class, they have enough character where they've developed it. And these are men. When I talk about these men who make this kind of money, people, a lot of times we've had streams where I had showed clips of women balking at men who made 45 or 50 grand a year. But we're talking about our teachers. We're talking about the police officers. We're talking about the social workers. We're talking about I'm a respiratory therapist. I have a clinical medical license, which requires a tremendous amount of education, skill, and know-how to save somebody's life. I'm in that bracket. There's enough of, we're going to have to come in and do the work to do this. And we're going to have to, and it, as they say, it's a package deal. We're going to have to accept our women with children. And hopefully, like guys in my generation can get maybe a 30 and start another family and start anew and try to break that trend with their set. But what's happening with what I think is happening out here, which kind of goes to the point of why there are no men in the church, where's the incentive for the men to do that? And that incentive have to come from our lady counterparts. I'm going to put a pin in that right there. We gonna wrap up the conversation. We normally do, like we started doing like this after stream, we continue the conversation after the stream for a couple minutes. I got other guests down here during the after stream. I'm going to bring them up, and I'm pretty sure that they've had plenty of things that they wanted to say and contribute. I haven't brought them on because I wanted this to be driven by our pastors and the conversation with the pastors. And this is much of a learning exercise for me as well, because, I'm looking at you guys as the authority on this issue. So those of us who are watching on the stream, I'm going to wrap the conversation, but don't log off, hang tight, and we'll come back and we'll do the 10-minute after stream, and we'll bring our friends up to talk to them, okay? Pastor Rush, thank you. The Thomases, thank you. Miss Tamala Lucas, where your husband at? You could have brought him on too.
He always hiding.
He always hide. He always hide. All right, give me a second. We'll be right back, okay? All right, real quick, Frederick, if you're still watching, I put the link in the chat. You can click the link if you want to come on up, Frederick. I know you've been, doing the comments. So if you're still on, you can come on up and just hit the link, Frederick. All right, guys, how do you guys think that went? Hello?
I logged in late.
It went real nice, TJ. Real nice. The questions and the feedback was very educational.
Huh. Come on, Angela.
What you say? Would you want me to say something? No, Now I'm just Frederick coming up.
I don't know.
Oh. I'm saying I talked about some of this last night on my show. we actually talked about the truth and compromise, because and what made me want to talk about that was I listened in to a show on my network, and I heard a pastor take a stand on abortion, and it was like one breath he was saying, he was totally against it, but then he was for the political person that was for abortion. So that
Angela, on YouTube, we're still live on YouTube, so we can't use that term.
Which term? Abortion?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They call it. We got to use self-deletion.
Well, what do you call it?
Yeah.
I mean,
they call it
it is what it is.
self-deletion or getting rid of or not keeping the child. We can't. They're very. Yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's the problem. We compromise too much.
Yeah.
We compromise too much. It's just like we compromising too much, and I'm just saying it's just a lot going on, and it's a lot of people just settling and just going for whatever.
What do you mean by we compromising too much? Hold on, Flo. What do you mean by we compromising too much? I don't know what you mean.
So, for example, you got Kirk Franklin doing music with Lil Baby and all these rappers, and that's compromising. You compromising. You don't. Why? You settling.
Go ahead, Christy. It's free for all.
So, okay. So, with that said, some of these younger people, the only Jesus they will ever hear of might be that Kirk Franklin and Lil Baby. So sometimes
that rap to Christian music, but it's not. It ain't Lil Baby, but they still rapping Christian music. I mean, you either gonna rap Christian music and it's gonna be Christian music, or you gonna rap
unaccosted. I would appreciate it, but sometimes you have to reach across the aisle in order to pull the younger crowd instead of being so staunch and so religious, because you can't be so holy that you're no earthly good. Sometimes those kids, I believe Jesus right now, if he were here alive, walking this earth, he'd walk up in the bars in the club.
I don't know about all that.
Sometimes we have to reach where they are, reach them where they are, because the church ain't nothing but a hospital where people come to get well, but we end up being so haughty and holy that we ain't good to nobody. We can't do that and block out our young people who just might need to be reached in a way that Lil Baby and Kirk Franklin can reach them. We can't hear her. We can't hear her.
The truth is the truth. It don't matter. As long as you speaking the truth, it don't matter. If you're not speaking the truth, it does matter. Compromise is just what it is.
Lil Baby and Kirk Franklin ain't speaking the truth. See, that's why we get it. We fall into the judgment.
You go listen to some of his music when he's talking about the lamb and go back to the goat. Come on now.
Pastor Rush, what do you think?
Well, TJ, that I believe in a grace-based church.
A what? Say that again.
Grace.
Okay.
Grace is a working definition of grace is a person finding favor to go into a place that they don't deserve to be in. So that puts all of us as Christians in the same place. Nobody on this platform deserves to be in God's presence, but He gives us favor to come in. Not because of what we do in our practice, what people see, what we think is good about us, how well we are husbands or wives. None of that matters. The only reason why we're able to go into God's presence and have a hope for eternity is because of the finished work of Christ. That's it.
Miss Diamond, you've been on. I, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just jotting down notes throughout this whole thing,
Come on.
and things that I just was feeling. And what I had written down was that the Black church wasn't just a place to worship. It was and it still is a place where we can call on our gods to embrace the role of the Black family and the Black spirit as well as the Black culture. Um, the It identifies the need of the individual and the community, and it transforms the Black family. And while I was listening, I wound up reflecting on the stories that many were talking about when they were younger, how if they were sick, they had to go to church anyway. I remember as well going to church as a young person and going with my brothers and just loving the walk, just to go, just to get out of the house, but to go and just to see everybody else, not really paying attention to what was going on, just knew that I was in the company of people who was talking about things that weren't discussed actually in the home all the time or in the community all the time. And it just made the difference for me. But when I became a teenager, yes, I steered in a different direction where I didn't go to church as much. And then when I became an adult and I started having my own children, I started thinking that what they were saying and what I feel and believe now when I was a child is one and the same for me. And I miss that. And I want to instill a lot of that in my children, but there are other entities that's also involved that will try to grab a hold of your children to steer them in a different direction. So that's something that and I'm only going to speak for me, that I have to work on. And I'm not saying that I'm not welcoming communities, but I work for a system and I've worked with several systems, and I'm very careful with those systems because they're too involved in the wrong way in my family's life and in my belief that the direction that I want to point my children in. So do I need the village? Yes, I do. Do I miss what I grew up with? Yes, I do. So I just go like this a lot of the times too, because I'm not giving up, nor will I ever. But I'm just, my hands is out like this because I need that helping hand of my community, Black, white, or indifferent. Need that helping hand, and that's just me. That's the way I feel about it.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, that last question, you know, that I brought up before we ended the conversation, whatever. You know, I believe in the earlier principles of the Black church. You know, it's how I was raised. It's where I get my moral compass from. I often reference back to stuff. I think upon it fondly. I have to admit that I really don't look at the current institution as fondly as I did, but I believe that with my generation coming aboard, especially my generation of men are coming aboard and having these conversations about what's going on with our women, with each other. And I know at times on here it can seem like that I'm just like jumping on our women, but I believe as a man, it's my job to hold not only myself accountable, but the women in my community accountable too. You have a piece of this. When it comes to the church, you know, this is where we most of us got our foundation, and I think part of the job can be done once again about figuring this thing out can be done within the church. Do we need to be all judgmental? No, because ain't nobody in that church is qualified, you know, to do that. But there is a standard that just because we don't need to be judgmental, that does not mean there's not a standard that needs to be realigned with us. There needs to definitely need to be a standard, and and kind of have it out there. A lot of times when we say people that when we make the statements that we're too judgy, it almost comes across like we're saying that no one can hold us accountable. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Go ahead, Christy.
Right.
So, where our young people are concerned, I think we have a standard set, but instead of, like the sister said, and the word of God says, with loving kindness have I drawn thee. I know when I was younger and I got pregnant before I got married. And so I'm walking around the church feeling like Hester Prynne, because people are looking at me. I grew up in the church, but people are looking at me until somebody called me and said, her name was Michelle Dalton, a really good friend of mine. She called me and said, don't feel bad, because you ain't doing nothing that the rest of us ain't doing. You just got caught. So when we start looking at our young people, we can't look at them like you doing something that I ain't never done before or ain't never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they feel pushed away, thrown
Mm-hmm.
aside, thrown away, and don't want to come up in the church. We have to draw them because the times are changing. And then too, our pastors and ministers are not teaching the whole word. They're not teaching the whole complete word.
Angel, you got to unmute because we can't hear you.
If you're going to teach it, teach all of it. I know as a 40, 50-year-old, almost 60-year-old woman, I have had so many questions. And here as of late, so many questions that I search and I'm wondering, God, where are you when all of this is going on? We've been dealing with the effects of slavery, Jim Crow, all this stuff for how many hundred years? 400 years? 500 years? 600 years? And it ain't got no better. Come on now. I need to know. I need to know, where are you and when are you going to do something? Because I can't stand back and watch somebody hurting my children and I not do something. So, I got questions, and I know if I have them, I ain't the only one. I'm not the only one to have some of these questions that are not being addressed. The question of the homosexuality. My mother brought us up, love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah.
You love the sinner. You love the person. You love the person that's out here stealing.
Mm-hmm.
Love them to a point where they know that they're not doing right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to love you anyway. There's a way that you can live right, live better. Yeah. But we so busy turning our noses up.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing, Christy. I hear you. But what I can't get away from, I hear you. But what I can't get away from is 25% of my black women are married and will ever get married. 33% of black men are married or will ever get married. That's unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
It's unsustainable. And then you got, hold on, and then you got, and then when you got that level of unsustainability, but then you got the majority of your black men out here who ain't got no kids and no families and looking around at our women and saying, why would I go in there and do that? We got a problem. And I think we have a problem large enough that I think the only institution that can deal with it within black culture is our black church. This is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, and I don't. I might be wrong on this, and my pastor, he's on the screen, can tell me. I'm not really caring so much now about hurting nobody's feelings about stuff. When we're dying off as there's no such thing as we keep saying black culture. We ain't got no culture. What are you talking about? Culture is built out of family, out of an anchor, a common identity.
So true.
So I mean, I understand all of this, but and we'll get back to this, revisit the church later, because historically, that's where information was done. That's where things were fixed. That's where things were addressed from an economic, political, social, and interfamily dynamically. It was done in the church. There were people in the 20s and the 30s and the 50s and the 60s in the church that were not of good moral character. There were people during the civil rights movement trying to undermine it. There were men going around having multiple families around the town. All of that was still happening during that time too. Those things have not changed. What has changed? We have decided to separate from one another. Now, when we get to the Queen Mother show, and I hate that this is a nice segment, I'm going to start dealing with that, and I'm probably going to tick a lot of people off about it. We're here to examine it, and of course, I can't change the world by myself. I can't change the world by myself, but good Lord. I mean, at some point, I kind of hate to make it about me, but there is some individual and there's some group things. Why am I 45 years old in a 3,000 square foot house by myself? Because I can't find an acceptable woman to come around that don't want to fight with me, all because I want some tradition. All because I want some tradition. I want a little bit of tradition. I'm a modern dude. I am very much open to being a stepfather, because guess what? I was raised in a house where my grandmother had a man in the house that was not my grandfather, that I tortured and tormented to death, even though I liked the man. This man protected me. He put food on the table. He made my grandmother laugh. This man was built, and he was solid, like physically hard like a rock. And me and my uncle with his kids, we used to attack this man. And not one time did he do anything unkind, anything rough with us. I mean, when he would get frustrated with us, he would sling us off of him. And we would find out real quickly why that man was a man. So my generation of men, we are more amenable to coming in and saying fine, but we're getting a lot of pushback from our ladies because we're asking our ladies to give us something a little bit more. You already gave away the best parts of you for free. That might not sound not nice and kind, but it's the truth.
Facts.
And I think our church is what is designed to do this. Hold on a second, guys. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Oh yeah, the like someone said, the black church is disconnected. You know, when I was growing up, I'm a PK, and we were in church all the time. And the kids in the church, we all went to church together, and we played together. We hung out at each other's houses. Families hung out together. And so now, you know, and I have to come from a place that I know. We as women, some of us have become so combative against our men, because, you know, they don't know any other way. We've had to fight to raise these kids and fight going to